your entire lives depend on her, and so you know her. So thank you for being here for this extracurricular event. And we're really happy to welcome John Newton, who's rector at St. Michael's and graduate of UT and DTS. We won't hold that against you.
Please don't.
Ordained in 09. So, and when were you ordained around the same time?
No, let's see, 2006.
2006. So collectively, almost 30 years of experience dressing like a priest in this room. So thanks you both for being here and take it away.
And I want to add to that, part of why I invited John to do this is because you all know, many of you know him because he's also chair of the Commission on Ministry in the Diocese of Texas, and before he came to St. Michael's, he worked on the bishop's staff in Houston, so I thought that with so many of you from the Diocese of Texas, I was really grateful that John was willing to share his experience in a broad context of this diocese and various ministries there. So thank you for agreeing to be here.
I'm thrilled.
I liked the, do you want to read your Bible verse, or you want me to read it? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Would it be helpful if I kind of started with some of the notes that I have?
Sure.
Or, yeah, and then.
We looked at your questions and tried to capture them in the notes that we put together, but if we miss something or, yeah, I mean, the intention is for this to be a back and forth conversation, so.
So what I thought I would do if it works out, I've got like 7-8 minutes of notes I can just kind of share, and then Hope can share, we can just have a conversation. But I thought I'd start with, a verse just to frame this, Matthew 6:25, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? So Jesus says this in the Sermon on the Mount, tells us not to worry about how we dress, and yet we do worry, and we do have some anxiety around that. And whenever I was in seminary, I had some anxiety around that, and that's not altogether inappropriate, because we are entering into a particular context where thoughtfulness about our attire is expected, hence the workshop. But we have this conversation, maybe mildly worrying about what we wear in the larger context of Jesus telling us not to worry about what we wear. Basically, my way of saying, like, this should not cause us tons of anxiety. And whenever Hope asked me to join her for this workshop, I have to say at first, it's not that I was going to say no, but I had to ask her, like, am I the right person to do this? Like, are you sure you want me to do this? Because the truth is, I don't think a whole lot about clergy attire day in and day out. But like the more I've reflected, that's only because I'm about 15 years in. I used to think about it a whole lot. And in particular, whenever I was fresh out of seminary or about to graduate. And I still recall my ordination to the diaconate. Like, I never put on a collar. My friend Patrick Hall had to like put the collar on me and show me how all the different things like fastened and like worked. Like, I didn't actually know how to do it. It took me a while to actually put on a collar in 45 seconds or less. And so that's kind of where I was, and so it makes a lot of sense. I think the question of clergy attire is a trickier question than it once was. And I think it's a trickier question than it once was because dress codes in our culture have kind of casualized into soft norms in the culture. And whenever you couple that with a variety of traditions and subcultures in the Episcopal Church in different contexts, right? There's low church, broad church, Anglo-Catholic, all the different kind of subcultures. It becomes clear that there is no like 10 commandments or code of conduct that we can just hand out that is going to kind of get you through the next several decades of ministry. That how we dress is ultimately an extension of our pastoral relationship with our parish. It is about knowing people, it's about knowing our context, and it's not so much a code that we just kind of all follow. And I have to say, in terms of this journey, I have learned by failing. has been one of kind of like learning as I go. And so my first job out of seminary was to be the campus missioner at the University of Texas. Very, very casual. That was appropriate for the context. The fanciest I tended to get was jeans and a collar on a Sunday night for Eucharist. But my second job was to go to the diocesan office in Houston, not the Austin office. I served there for 7 years in 2 different roles, the first one being the canon for lifelong Christian formation. And I knew early on that it was a more formal culture, that a suit and a collar and professional dress was expected day in and day out, a very kind of formal setting. But whenever I started on a Friday. And I'd spoken with Bishop Doyle on the phone, who had hired me, and he said, oh, by the way, Fridays are a little bit more casual. They're just a little bit more casual. You don't need to wear a collar on Fridays. This was a couple weeks prior to my start date. So I show up my first day wearing jeans and a button down, and these were kind of old Levi jeans, had some holes in them, not like the cool designer jeans with holes, like you need new jeans kind of holes. And I kind of go to my office and I'm piddling around. I get there at 9, it's like 9:05. And then this big delegation kind of comes towards my office, my very first day. And they're all in very nice suits, Bishop Doyle and the Canon to the Ordinary and all these high-powered rectors. And I hear, Canon Newton, I want you to meet Lord Cary. And there is George Cary, Archbishop of Canterbury from 1991 to 2002, looking in a beautiful suit, pectoral cross, and I'm just kind of sitting there in my Levi's and my jeans, with holes ripped in it. And I quickly, anyone who knows Bishop Doyle knows that he likes to, he has a good sense of humor. I quickly became the example of how not to dress on casual Fridays. And for the next 7 years, I made sure that I never dressed in that particular way again. So 7 years later, it's my first day, 7 and some change as rector of St. Michael's, and this is what I wear. I wear something like this, and the first thing someone says to me is, oh my goodness, it's your first day and someone died. what time is the funeral? And I didn't know what they were talking about. I explained there was no funeral. The second day I had a pastoral meeting at a coffee shop, wore a suit. It quickly became apparent that I was dressed inappropriately for this context. That St. Michael's in Austin in particular was a casual place, and that there was a time to dress it up, but that to pastorally connect in this other context, I had to kind of shift the wardrobe. And I'm not going to tell all my stories of like when I was dressed inappropriately, but I share those to say that like if you can enter this like with a little bit of a sense of humor and like know that there's going to be just a little bit of figuring this out as you go, and that there are going to be some times when it's a little funny, that's probably going to serve you well. So I just have kind of a few principles to share from my notes. One is that I think that new clergy should always know the standard of dress amongst their parishioners, and then when in doubt, that you should strive to dress one standard deviation more formally than that. That will ensure that you are always respectably dressed, but you're not so formally dressed that it's going to elicit comment. So kind of wherever your context is, kind of eye the context and maybe one notch up in terms of formality. If you have a rector, which you will out of seminary, is my guess that you will have a rector, a boss, I suggest that you follow his or her example. And I think it's always appropriate to ask for very specific guidance on what is expected in the context you serve. It is a rector's job to let you know that. Clergy shirts are traditionally black. If you choose to wear a different color than black, avoid anything that is close to purple. No plum, no pink, nothing that could ever confuse you with a bishop, right? Because how we dress is a sign of our office, and now in our context, that color shirt signifies a bishop. I think that it would be good early on, if you don't have one, to purchase a nice suit or whatever, a nice set of clothing for, maybe in navy or gray or whatever is classic, that can last you a decade. Something that is, it's not gonna go anywhere for at least 10, 15 years, that you will kind of have as a staple at funerals and weddings and nicer occasions.
And, yeah, I don't know that you need to, as a woman, buy a full suit matching, but I do think you're gonna want at least one good dark jacket with structured shoulders that goes with some of your slacks and skirts or whatever you wear and your clergy shirt. To add on to that, if you don't mind, I don't mean to.
No, it's perfect, yeah.
I think the first time you're called to go into a funeral home and meet with a family that's a stranger, you will be really, really glad to have that very formal representation of this ministry and maybe hospital calls, things like that, like to have that. Sometimes a hospital call, if you don't know the family well, can be really helpful to be like a little dressier than maybe you are for your office, and to be like so clearly identified in your office in those contexts where you're moving among people who don't know you in your ministry. So, and then absolutely for weddings and funerals and things like that, it's very good to show up at a wedding rehearsal in a suit or it's, at least a structured jacket. And that is one of the ways you communicate to perhaps a wedding coordinator or a future mother-in-law your authority in that context, and that can be really important to establish at a rehearsal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. In terms of liturgical vesture, I understand that everyone's going to have different funds available to them. I'm well aware of what clergy people make, especially right out of seminary. So this is not this is something to work towards, but all else being equal, and sometimes for ordinations, people will give you gift cards and you can request that. If you can work towards owning your own cassock alb, I think sometimes people now just call it an alb, but just like, the modern alb that people wear, as well as a cassock and surplice. I think that moving towards owning a set of your own stoles in red, green, purple, and white, that are in your dimensions, and I emphasize in your dimensions just because, every church is different, and you never know what they're gonna have, and it may or may not work for you and for kind of who you are, and so to work towards that would be good. A consistent bit of feedback that I've received and kind of asking people about this conversation is that pictorial crosses are for bishops. Until the 1960s, there were only 3 signs of the office of bishop. They didn't wear purple shirts, back then. The 3 signs were the mitre for the liturgy. Bishops got a ring, and they got a pectoral cross. And Hope and I had some conversation about this. What makes it a bishop's cross, a pectoral cross? And they're bigger. They're a little bit more blingy. You'll see them, they'll wear them, they'll wear it and they'll put it in their pocket here, so it often looks like there's a chain hanging down with the cross in the pocket. And so I don't think that there's any restriction on wearing a cross around your neck, but just to avoid anything that could be confused with the pectoral cross that bishops wear, because that is a sign of the episcopal office.
The seminary cross that we get at graduation, is that smaller? It's not going to be confused with something like that?
I think you can get away, yes, I think that one is small enough, and it's simple silver, no gems on it, so I think that you could wear that one and not confuse it with a pectoral cross. And this won't be an issue for you, at least not, I don't know, none of my clergy shirts have pockets. So that's an awkward position for a blouse to have a pocket, so, but you guys,
That's a good point.
it's gonna be in the way when you're working at your desk and you still can't put it in your pocket, even if it's a really simple one, because that seems to be like a really clear, bright line of how bishops wear it versus the way priests are allowed to, yeah.
I've always wondered why bishops put it in the pocket. Why is that?
Jingle jangle.
I think it's a combination of it being annoying, right?
Yeah.
If it's a big, heavy thing, it is gonna be like, and so putting it in your pocket makes it a little less cumbersome to wear, and then
The
have
jingles.
like all the other things that make it a pectoral cross, like it's close to your heart, it's precious, it's right there near you, is the more symbolic reason for that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's both, realistically.
Yeah, that's good. I emailed Bishop Doyle, asked him 2 questions. I just thought I'd share these. I said, what are your pet peeves or absolute no-nos with respect to clergy attire? And then I said, are there any norms you wish to see take root in the diocese/church around clergy attire? So this would be for those that are in the Diocese of Texas, but for those not in the Diocese of Texas, it at least is the perspective of a bishop in the church. So his answer to the pet peeves, this is what he said. He just kind of fires off emails really quickly. He said, recognize the occasion and how to dress. There's a difference between seeing the bishop and hanging out in your office when you don't have an appointment. He said, think of what others are wearing and not what you want to wear. And I think that's his way of basically saying that your dress, when you're dressed in clergy attire, this is not primarily about self-expression. You are representing an office, a public office. And it's not that your own personal preferences, they're irrelevant. You get to choose what color sock. I mean, there's some things that you get to choose, but that it is ultimately not about representing yourself, which is how we often think of dress in our culture. You're representing an office. And then he said, flip-flops, ? Really, ? So I'd be careful with flip-flops in the Diocese of Texas. I asked him, are there any norms you wish to see take root in the diocese? And he just said, keep it clean, wear a collar, keep it clean too. He said, stop trying to be countercultural and cool. Being a clergy person today is countercultural, helping people get over their fear of clergy in the church, and helping them understand that the church can be a good, peaceful, and loving community is actually part of wearing one's collar. And so I think what he's getting at there, kind of knowing some of the background, is that often clergy people have some anxiety around how we're perceived, around how other people have experienced the church, and we kind of overfunction and then dress and act differently, trying to be kind of hip and cool, and I don't know. I'm just kind of filling some things in, but he really seems to think if you really want to be countercultural, represent the office and represent it with professionalism and in a manner that is nice. The last thing I'll say, then I'll turn it over to Hope, is because there is no code of conduct, right? There's no, here's the checklist. I came up with 4 principles that I think would be good to hold in mind as you think about dressing. Number 1 is represent the public office and not yourself. To be a priest, it's a vocation. It's also it's an office. It's a role tied to a set of duties, and how we dress represents that office. And this is not primarily about self-expression. It is okay to dress to express yourself. You just have to know where you are and what you're doing when you're clothing yourself as a priest and representing the office, and when you're doing something else. Number 2 is know your context and adapt for the sake of mission. Paul says to the Jews, I became a Jew, to the Greeks, I became a Greek, that he adapted himself based on where he was serving, and you will need to do the same throughout the course of your ministry. Not all contexts are the same. I mean, no one ever told me to wear a suit at diocesan council and to wear jeans and a button down for clergy conference. That's just the context. I mean, that's just kind of how it works here in our diocese, and you learn that pretty quickly. No one ever actually said, even though what Hope just said was very helpful, this is how you dress for a wedding rehearsal, but it really helps once you figure that out. You're more effective in that role. Number 3, follow the example of your rector if you have one, and when in doubt, just ask. Ask what's expected. And then the last thing I have is when in doubt, if there's a tie, if you're not sure what to do, break the tie in the direction of a little bit more formality and leaning into something more traditional, if there's a tie. And so those would be my principals.
What do you mean by more traditional?
Good question. So I think what I really mean is formality. Maybe tradition's a poor word. I think what I mean is that a lot of times the question is, how formal should one dress? How formal should one dress? Is this a casual setting or is it a more formal setting? And often it's not very clear. Like you're invited to a parishioner's home. You don't know if it's casual. I mean, you don't quite know why you're going. My going is, what's appropriate here? And you can't really ask. I think what I mean is, when in doubt, if you don't know whether or not to throw on the sport coat, just throw on the sport coat. It's kind of where I'm leaning.
Just trying to prevent you from seeing a flock of us down the street in cassocks.
Yes.
And I think in those contexts, when you're invited to a thing, a parishioner's invited you to a thing, or you're going to show up and support a parishioner, like if you're, I don't know, 4 of your kids are in a play, and you show up in a collar, you're never gonna regret the choice to wear a collar in those kinds of contexts. And there have been moments where I wish I had worn a collar in some of those, not at my parish, but off-campus events, because I realized I missed opportunities to connect with people in that symbolic role of the church way, because I wasn't dressed that way. Hi, John.
That's I like the way Hope put that a lot better than the way that I put it, because there will be those moments, right, especially once you build deep, meaningful relationships, when you're just connected to people and they're like, hey, come to the game, or come to this, or whatever, and it can be a little confusing, like, in what way am I there? I don't really know. And you have the choice to put on a collar to represent symbolically yourself as priest or not. And I think the principle was, like what Hope said, when in doubt, kind of lean in that direction.
So I appreciate what you're saying about representing the office of a clergy person. But I think one of the things that's hard for the women is in the room is that historically it has been for clergy women to basically dress as men. And to completely subvert your gender in favor of looking like a priest, which we construe to be a certain view of male priests. So I just think if I were to do kind of what you were saying, it would be dressing in clericals all the time in a way that is not true to myself at all and what I bring to the office of a clergy person.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a little bit of a harder.
I think, though, it is something you will grow into. I think I felt that way a lot when I first graduated from seminary. And for one thing, there weren't options, right? There were not clergy shirts that fit well. It was very challenging to find clothes that fit well and looked right as clergy clothes, right? And so I think I felt that a lot more acutely earlier on. And now that I've grown into it, I'd like to think that I have found ways to wear clergy clothes that feel like my clothes too, And I still only wear black shirts, for example. It's not that you all see what I do. I've not gone, I don't think, in a radical direction, but the clothes really feel like mine now in a way that they didn't when I was new at it. And so, and I don't know, I suppose you all would tell me better than I. Certainly my non-binary kid tells me that I dress in a way that's very feminine and very coded, and I don't feel like I'm sacrificing that most days when to dress as a clergy person. So somebody asked, how do we make it fun? So I love a colorful skirt that goes with a black blouse, and that as a place to put some of that sense of fashion and style and keep up with those. And those feel really, really comfortable to me in a casual or a dressier context. I wore all through pregnancies, I wore maternity dresses with a Janie underneath it, and that worked really, really well and felt very comfortable and matched kind of what other pregnant women were wearing when I was, at least at the time, So Yeah, I mean, it literally felt itchy the first few times I wore a collar, right? Like honestly, I was fidgeting with it the whole time. Like physically, it took a while to feel comfortable wearing it. And then developing it as a part of a style that felt authentically mine. Yeah, it took some time and some experimentation, and there's some things that I would look at that I wore early on that I would not wear today, you know? So I don't know if that's helpful. I also think that it's, compared to where we were now all of the clergy dresses that are available and the ways that you can mix color with those and things like that feel a lot more freeing than when I first was trying to figure this piece out. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but Megan?
I was gonna ask, I know that you said you only wear black, but would you say that the, like, wearing different colored clergy shirts is more on the casual end? Like, if you were gonna make that choice of like taking a step towards more formal, you would just wear black?
You wanna answer that now, or do you want me to start with that?
Why don't you start?
So I started wearing only black because I was first ordained in St. Louis, which is a really heavily Roman Catholic context. And there were lots of people who wanted to misread the symbol when I showed up in a clergy shirt because I didn't fit their mold of what a clergy person could be. And I found that wearing black shirts made that harder to do. They recognized me as a clergy person if I showed up in a black shirt. Whereas if I showed up in a blue, sometimes I thought I was a nun or a nurse or I don't know what else, lots of other things. A nun, I got that a lot, which was awkward when I was pregnant. Even more awkward than it had been before, but really awkward. So like that context, it became, to me, the black, I don't know if it's more formal, but it was definitely a clearer symbol to people who, and it was important to me at that time to be clear about the symbol and to show up that way. The other thing in St. Louis, at least in that context, was deacons, vocational deacons in the church were not allowed to wear black. So they wore, I don't think that's the rule anymore, but the deacons would wear the blues and the greens and the pretty colors, and so it felt like the purple was reserved for the bishops, the black was reserved for us priests, and so it felt like the right thing to do. I imagine that's not the context anymore. That was almost 20 years ago. But I think at the time, that was such a clear line that it made more sense to wear the black and not confuse people in our own context about what I was doing. So I don't know if it's more formal. It just is, to me, in my experience, just much clearer what it means with a black shirt. Yeah?
I would agree with that. I mean, whenever I do have some blue kind of striped shirt. I broke my own rule. I even have like a pink kind of striped shirt, but that's only because I've had the same shirts for like well over a decade, and I sometimes run out of black shirts, and I need to throw another one on. I think that, again, it kind of goes back to context. Like, where are you? And if you are not with people who with whom you already have relationships, I think more people will always recognize a black shirt with a collar as the sign of the priestly office, and in particular in the one holy Catholic apostolic tradition. You know, like, and I think that I just think that all else being equal, like, fewer people will recognize it with kind of the different colored shirts that are out there, even though I have them and I sometimes wear them.
So I have a question more on the other end of that. That is, when to wear the collar when it might seem like the situation is more casual than it merits wearing the collar. Like, what's your opinion on that? So, like, for example, I know that a lot of clergy I know that if they're going to like a protest, or they're going to like something that might incur some kind of public attention, they like to wear the collar to kind of signify the clergy is on behalf of the people here in this issue, right? But like, even if it's something even more casual than that, like if you're going to, I don't know, like, I'm having a hard time coming with an example, but like, let's say if you're going to like,
grocery store?
Maybe not that casual, but I was gonna say like, okay, I thought of one. What if you're gonna see a play and you know that the governor and his family are gonna be at the play, and you decide, well, you know, it's not for the cameras, it's not for the public, it's for like to send the message that like, you know, like, that the people, the priests are here. You know, like, what do you think about that? Do you think that's like inappropriate, or do you think that's like valid, or what's your take?
it's a good question. I mean, it's gonna come down so much to, again, like, you know, and I want to go back to and answer this kind of to your comments, which I think are really valid and important to wrestle with. And the reason that I don't just have principles, I have general principles, right? Because they really are general. But the question is, what will your specific principles be that guide how you dress as a priest? And it really comes down to that. I mean, I think the question is always like, what's happening when you're going to the play? Are you trying to do a million things at once? Are you taking, you know, is this for me, if I'm taking my daughter to the Nutcracker, it's a daddy-daughter date, you know, like, am I trying to do that and also represent the office at once? Should I try to do that? You know, like, what's happening here? And so, what does Paul say? All things are permissible, not all things are beneficial.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, it's all permissible. I mean, with the exception of not dressing like a bishop, or, you know, I mean, most things in clergy life and clergy attire are permissible. The question is it beneficial, and what does it benefit? And is that a value you have? And so, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, though. Yeah.
I was gonna ask on the other end of that, are there moments when you've worn the collar, or you've been in clergy attire, where you wish you hadn't?
Where I wish that I had not?
Yes.
Only for superficial reasons, not for any real values. Like, I mean, I opened this by saying I've learned by failing, right? So, like, my first, when I was a campus missioner, you know, for instance, I was told that we were welcome at executive board meetings, and I thought that I had to go to executive board meetings, and that executive board meetings were full of executives who dress like executives, and it's really just a room like this at Camp Allen with, it was very casually dressed, and I show up at this meeting that I don't belong at in a suit and a collar. I'm like, I wish I wasn't here, and I wish I wasn't wearing a collar. But that's really kind of, again, like a very kind of trying to figure this out, ego-driven thing. But based on values, I think no, because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a larger conversation about integration between inhabiting the role and then who you are when you're not inhabiting the role. And it's very natural and normal to start out with like this split, and where there's like really rigid boundaries. This is who I am when I'm, you know, and that's a very, that separation is a very normal and healthy thing that we do, and it's very wise at the very beginning of our ministry. But ultimately, we want to get to the place to where it's a little bit more seamless and integrated. To where you're happy to put on the collar at any time, and you're aware that you are representing an office and inhabiting a role, but you're not divorced from yourself, if that makes any sense. And I think if you get to that place, you'll never regret wearing a collar. I mean, unless, of course, like you're going to a friend's bachelor party and you wore, I don't know. Like, I mean, there's times when you just don't need to wear it, but
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
I would think hard about wearing a collar to a gathering that's going to be only other clergy. We have siblings in the Diocese of Texas who do that, and I often wonder why, and that's not my business, but I think you're definitely making a statement if you show up in a gathering with where it's all other clergy and it's an only clergy gathering, right? Like clergy that's the difference between diocesan convention and clergy conference, right? The lay people are also at convention and we're doing work there, right? Clergy conference is meant to be about our wellness and our professional development and our growth together and collegiality. And so wearing a collar in that context, I think, is a pretty bold choice. And maybe maybe I'm just bleeding my judgment all over the place and John would dial it back. But it definitely communicates something to show up in a context like that in a collar. And that may not be what you want to say.
Well, I think and tell me if this sounds right. What it feels like, so, you know, with the office comes a certain burden of responsibilities. I mean, in fact, one of the chief ways one receives a pastoral directive, the behavior is conduct unbecoming of a clergy person, right? Every time you dress like this, there is certain conduct, that certain way of conducting oneself that is expected. And so, and symbolically speaking, right? I mean, symbolically speaking, it's been a long day, I've had a lot of meetings, it's been kind of crazy, there's been a little bit of emotional effort because I'm not my best self, so I've got to really try hard to represent the office. And I hop in that car and I don't wait. I mean, this is not every day, but it's like it's time to take this off. I've been in wearing this, I've been holding something more than an office. Today was a day when I held other people's anxiety, or I held other people's hurt, or I held something that's just too hard for me to hold any longer. And so it's not thoughtful, but I take it off, and what I'm really doing in that moment is I'm saying, I need to take off the responsibility of this office because I'm a human being, and I need rest, and I need rejuvenation. And so I think what you're getting at is that when you're invited into a setting of other clergy people where it's not about bearing the weight of the office, but about learning, growth, connection, that you don't wear the collar.
Yeah, I think
Does
that's right.
does that feel right to you?
Yeah, showing up as your non-priest self in that way. If there's not a non-priest self, but showing up with that office put aside for the minute I think is really good. The other place where I would encourage you to think very carefully is when you're going to be in any kind of mass transit, like a plane. I never wear a collar in those contexts. I know that I have sibling clergy who always wear a collar in that context because they feel like it's an important evangelism field and they're interested in doing that and being open to that. I, again, and maybe this is partly because of the gender stuff in here, am not interested in being caught in a small space with a person who may think my whole personhood is an offense to the church and the priesthood. And there's like a 50-50 chance that a person who sees me in a collar is going to engage that way versus in a way that opens up a chance for me to be pastorally present with them. And I'm just, even when I'm flying on behalf of the seminary to a diocesan counselor convention somewhere else, and I'm going to be on the exhibit floor, that's like 3 hours after I get off the plane. I change in airport bathrooms, I change in hotel convention bathroom, whatever it is. Like, I don't like to be in a collar in that context. So I would be thoughtful about that. And a lot of that is gendered because I can't not be a woman in a collar wherever I go. And so they don't know all of that. But I know of priests who've gotten it even when the Catholic sex abuse stuff was really, really present in the news, and they encountered people who were working through their feelings and about that, and male priests had to bear some of that. My brother priests who choose to do that, they feel like that's part of what they're supposed to be doing. That's part of the work of wearing that collar and being in a collar on a plane, and they're willing to do that. I will say it feels a little unsafe to me, and so I'm not willing to do that. So I'm putting that out there. This is the thing about it is it's not neutral to wear a collar, right? And people are going to have feelings and thoughts and opinions when you show up, right? And some of that is going to be tied up into the kind of embodiedness that you bring into that. I know, because I know I'm comparing notes. Andrew is 9 months older than I am, so we were nearly exactly the same. We were ordained on the same day to the priesthood. So we were both young priests, right, in the same diocese. And the stuff that people felt like they could say to me, and the kinds of questions I got about the symbol of the collar and the choices I made in my dress and things like that, I would come home and just be like, and he got none of that, right? Like, he didn't have to deal with any of that. So I know that some of this has to do with my embodied reality, but there are parts of it that are universal too, I think. So, yeah.
That's good.
I wonder where the line is between invitation seems like that wearing this needs to be in the context of invitation. And then however that invitation shows up has to be, kind of, however that invitation is accepted, you have to be willing to step into that.
Uh-huh.
Which I can see being a beautiful thing and also a scary thing.
I would also, what your comment about the airplane, makes me think of, and even if you, to be mindful, so this idea of mindfulness, of not just knowing what's happening with your thoughts, but as you start dressing, as you're ordained and you start knowing kind of how you're dressing, when you're dressing, just to pay attention the first couple months to what's happening with you, to what's happening with your behavior, what's happening with your emotions, what's happening, there is I think about that airport scene, assuming it was actually a positive pastoral connection, when I've had a pastoral connection at the airport, I can't say that just because someone offloaded their story on me that it was a meaningful pastoral interaction. But assuming that even if it is a meaningful pastoral interaction, you do have limited emotional, spiritual reserves. And it's not a scarcity thinking, it's just stewarding your finitude, your humanity. You only have so much to give. Mm-hmm. And the question is, to Hope's point about it not being neutral, when do you have the resources to give that? Are you trying to give too much? Are you giving at the right time? I mean, asking some of those questions and then kind of knowing your tell for when you're burnt out or you're depleted or you've been over-functioning or you've been trying to solve everybody's problems, right? And kind of connecting that to the role you're inhabiting and how your dress speaks to that. I mean, you can write a sermon, if your work one day is writing a sermon and it's appropriate in your context for you to write that from your home office, from 9 to 2 when the house is quiet, versus wearing a collar at the office with an open door when people are coming in and out. I promise you those are two different emotional expenditures. And just to kind of pay attention to that. And that's also part of the calculation for me.
I think to that end, you talked about inhabiting the role and putting the collar on as inhabiting the role. I think that goes back to some of what Luis was saying about the protest and some of the other things, right? If you show up in a collar at a protest, there might be chance that you shouldn't participate in, right? That maybe that's an appropriate sense of anger for the context, but not Christ-like speech that you would want to shout in a collar, right? And so to think about that, is this thing that I want to participate in a thing that I think the church could say alongside me? Or I not, or maybe it would be better to show up not in a collar so that I can be fully emotionally and use a curse word in a chant publicly, all of that, right? Maybe that's a line you want to draw. I don't know. None of you would go into a protest and vandalize something, but there going to be more fences around your behavior if you show up in that context with a collar than there might be if you show up more as yourself and less as a representative of the church, right? And I think that's true of everywhere you show up, right? The protest is a really clear, bright place to think about it, but it drives my kids crazy now that they're teenagers. But Andrew and I always say grace in public. We always say it at home too, but we always say grace in public because you get to where you forget you're wearing a collar and people are really hurt and shocked if you don't say grace in public, and even people you didn't know were looking at you are looking at you if you're in a restaurant in a collar, right? And so we always say grace together, little gestures like that. And I think I've told the story about my childhood priest flipping somebody off when he was wearing a collar and how harmful that was, but also very much in character of his personhood, right? And so to learn, he had to really, he probably would have been better if he'd done more of a practice of taking the collar off when he got in the car, right? That probably would have served him well. But because people are gonna receive leave those choices not as your own. Even if you think really clearly, I'm wearing this collar and it's only about me, the church says, and the people who are around you see, if you show up in a collar, you're representing me too, and John, and Cynthia, and your bishop, and all of your congregation. Like, you are representing something much bigger than yourself when you show up in a context in a collar. And so you have to inhabit that role in a thoughtful, intentional way, I think.
And to your question about what do you mean by formality and tradition, it was something that I was trying to swim in that sea there, to say that, like, when in doubt, you're representing people not in the room, and to be a little bit more conservative, or, I mean, whatever, wherever you can go with your thinking there. That's kind of what I meant. What are you anxious about, or what is exciting, or like kind of how do you feel when you think about, yeah.
This is very superficial in regards to the previous conversation we had, but I'm a sweater. What recommendations?
You're a what?
I'm a sweater. I sweat a lot.
Very good sweater.
I'm also wearing a sweater. I'm wearing a sweater. Which sometimes it's helpful when I'm sweating to wear a sweater, so people can't see that I'm sweating. But yeah, what recommendations do y'all have as it comes to, like, do you feel like sweat shows up a lot in clergy attire, or like how do you
Don't live in
mitigate
Texas,
that?
I guess.
Yeah, don't live in Texas.
Interrogate your deodorant. That's the thing.
Oh, it's
I had to do
I've
the
got
same,
good-
I had to do the same thing, and sorry, but and I tried out a bunch of different antiperspirants,
Mhm.
trying to find clean, only free, and all that sort of stuff. And I finally found one that worked.
It's-
But it took a lot of work. Like
It's hard to find clergy shirts in natural fabrics, which is annoying
Yeah.
for that question.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't know what is gonna work for you. Like, an undershirt is not really an option for me, the way women's clothes are cut, but it might be an option for a guy under a clergy shirt to keep that, to feel comfortable with that. I don't know what else. Oh, and you can get, though, you might try out a fabric collar instead of a plastic one. I always wear plastic ones, but the fabric ones have gotten much easier to take care of in the last decade or so, and I think that can make a huge difference in your comfort level. A tab collar might be more comfortable than a round collar, because you don't have the plastic all the way around your neck, so that might be another thing to try that feels a little more comfortable. I know, like, Nathan wears the Gayavara clergy. Those look like they'd be cool and comfortable. Like,
Yeah.
they're so boxy, but I'm like, why isn't there a women's version of that? I really like that.
They're linen, right?
I get
But
that.
yeah.
Yeah, super nice.
So maybe something like that, if it matches your context and it's not too casual for your setting, something like that might be more comfortable, or certainly like a weekday in the office, something like that might work really well.
You just make like custom-made Nike dry fit clericals.
It's still in development. Yeah.
But I think the other thing here is, like, I mean, it kind of goes back to the reason we started that verse, therefore do not worry about your life, what you wear, like, you know, we just gotta do our best. I mean, this, like, it really is, in some sense, like an impossible thing. Like, I mean, the world changes so fast, like there's, you know, we've talked about gender stuff, we've talked about different settings, different bishops, different personalities. Like, all you can really do is, like, your best, and look, from time to time, we're just gonna sweat, and we're gonna get sweaty, and it's gonna be okay, you know? Not that big of a deal.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Could
Another
envision it
thing
just
that
like
I
a
didn't
little
share,
Nike
and this
swoosh.
is, it's probably good advice for everybody, but this is a Diocese of Texas thing. At Clergy Conference every year, we have something the first night called the Bishop's Fireside Chat. And he reminds us every year that it doesn't take place by fire and that it's not a chat. He just like talks at us. And he tells us all the things that, you know, some of it's serious, some of it's light, and it kind of holds like the family meeting time. And there's, you know, silly things and serious things. He tells us we need to be doing or not doing and thinking about. And then there's things in between. But one year, I mean, 20 minutes were spent on clergy who did not clean their cassock out, you know, who didn't have like clean outs. So, you know, get a rotation, wash it, iron it, you know, every couple of weeks, don't let it get too dirty. And I would say, when the bishop comes, when he or she comes, you know, make sure it's clean. Like, put up, when the bishop visits, part of what he or she is looking for is like, do you know that there's a bishop's visitation? And so, you know, just be mindful of how that might lead to some more thoughtfulness around dress and cleaner vestments, because bishops really do notice, and they look, and they comment.
I always say, get your hair cut and your out washed during 3rd Advent and 4th Lent, because if you wait, you're gonna run out of time and you're gonna miss it. So, just, it doesn't matter if you think you got your hair cut in November and it's not time, you should get it done during 3rd Advent and 4th Lent, because those are times when you actually have a minute to breathe out and attend to those things. So, you're probably gonna wash your out a whole lot more than that, but do it those 2 times too, so that you're ready for Christmas and Easter.
I mean, plus for those occasions, the Altar Guild will fight you to be the ones to do the cleaning, because, you know, for those days, they want it to be up to their standards. So even if it's your job to keep stuff clean, they'll be like, why don't you let me do that this time, Louise? I'll make sure that it's clean for this occasion.
I will tell you, in my experience, even that is gendered. I've never had someone offer to take my out home and wash it for me, and I don't think it's because my out is significantly cleaner than Andrew's, but Andrew has that experience almost everywhere he shows up, where some Altar Guild directress will offer to do. And I don't know if it's like an insult to me as a woman to suggest I don't do my own laundry. It's not. I won't take it personally. You can wash my stuff. Or if it's just, you know, I mean, but then is just, I think you are the first person who offered to wash mine out, because I think you were responsible for doing it.
Well, yeah, but like, I remember for Christmas and Easter, Christmas and Easter, Gail would be like, Louise, I can do it for this time. Like, I'd be like, no, it's part of my rotation. I plan ahead to do it on Christmas and Easter. And she'd be like, I can do it with the other linens. And I was like, okay.
But before that, it never happened to me, right? And people, and the Altar Guild ladies would take Andrew's out home and wash it. He even has little cross-stitched tags with his initials on it that Altar Guild ladies gave him and sewed into the collars of his vestments. No one has offered such a thing to me, so I guess I'm supposed to do my own cross-stitch.
I'm gonna wash her out.
So, I'm getting into embroidery as a hobby. Would you like for me to embroider your initials?
I was going to say, I don't cross stitch.
It's funny, and it's also like, it's really real that there's a difference between showing up as a woman and showing up as a man, and some of it is great, right? Like, there was some really amazing things about being pregnant at Advent. It's really cool, and people are really excited about it, and also to show up at the Women's Guild things and to participate and be really there and not just an observer, you know? And then there's like a lot of stuff, and the dress is a place where I feel like it gets crunchy and it hits hard. So anyway.
For both of y'all, how do people perceive the round collars versus the tab collars? And for Hope, how do people perceive skirts versus pants?
So round collar versus like the tab collar, the more Roman look. So that's a good question. I only wear these. That's there's nothing there other than this is what I have and kind of what I'm used to. The only thing I have to offer there, and I don't know if this is valid or not valid, it just what comes to mind, is that the tab collar, you're more likely to be confused with a Roman priest if you're a male. And it kind of signifies a little bit more of an Anglo-Catholic or Roman Catholic vibe. Whenever I think about like the people I know, and again, I'm at least the males, like that a lot of times that they're a little bit more Anglo-Catholic in identity when they wear the tab collar. That's the only thing that comes to mind. This feels like a little bit more Protestant, but that's all I got there.
I think that's accurate, but I also think you can wear whichever feels comfortable to you. So I like the way the round collar looks on me more than I like the way a tab collar looks, and so I've only ever worn them that way. So, but I think that's right. I do think if people were going to assign meaning to it, they would assign Roman or higher church to the tab and Protestant and lower church to the round collar. But it's not. It doesn't actually mean that. I think You know what I mean? There's like, it's not written anywhere, or it's not, yeah?
Do Roman Catholic priests wear them?
I don't think they would, I've never seen a Roman priest wear a
No,
collar.
they don't.
Yeah.
I know in like New Orleans, which is a very Catholic city, that was kind of like the Episcopal priests just did not wear tab collars because they would always be like, they didn't want to be confused with like the Catholics. I mean, it's very rare to see a tab collar on an Episcopal priest in New Orleans.
But most of the men I know who wear the tab collars, well, actually the women too, it's because it is more comfortable. It's a lot easier to take it off when you're done, when you don't want to wear it, and stick it in your shirt pocket if you're a dude, and it's like a little, it does feel more comfortable to them. It's nicer to have some fabric and not plastic all the way around your neck, like, so, I don't know. I mean, I think you can wear what you like and what feels good to you. I think that's okay.
I'd have one more comment, then I think you had a question, but,
Sarah asked about skirts too.
Oh,
so-
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was also gonna say, it took me a while to figure out like the right size collars, right? These come in an inch, inch 1 and 1/4 inch, 1.5 inch, and then there are also different sizes around your neck. And you get too tight, it's uncomfortable. There's a stud that goes right here against your neck. You get too loose, it's baggy and it just doesn't look good, right? If it's too, small and you're shorter, you got your shirt hanging out. I mean, so like, I would, to the best that you can, before just like ordering like a bunch of collars, see if you can find, I would experiment with a few different sizes, both around your neck and also in terms of like how tall of a collar, to see what you really want before you like hit a mass order. Because they're not super expensive, but they're not as cheap as you think, you know?
An ill-fitting collar is good enough for Justin Welby. It's good enough for anyone here.
I don't know if I've noticed a difference. I don't know. I like skirts now and wear them almost exclusively because I'm most comfortable in them. I don't know if I've thought about how people perceive me in them. I do think like a
I haven't forced you to think about it.
yeah, no. So I guess I think when I was in parish ministry more, I did have pantsuits that I would wear with a collar for something like a wedding or something like that. But that was as much about, y'all, this is a lot. Like, forgive me if this is but like about what kinds of shoes I could wear with those and what was going to be comfortable with that, and the whole thing as it was about like an intentional choice to wear slacks. It was just fit the whole day's comfort in a different way than a skirt would have in that context, and the kinds of shoes that work with skirts versus the kinds of shoes that work with slacks, as you know, and when I was, it also too, like, now, I do a lot of children's ministry at St. Michael's now. It's part of what is a real joy to me there, that I get to, since I work with you all here, it's nice to stay connected with children there. So slacks are really nice when I know I'm gonna be sitting on the floor reading a story and doing that kind of thing, so that, I don't think I really think of it as a symbolic choice, and I haven't had that reflected back at me yet.
Do people consider one more formal than the other? Like if you're going for like following the this is a place to be extra formal.
Oh, then yeah, my skirts are more formal than my slacks for the most part. Yeah, it does have to do with the fabric and the cut and stuff like that too, right? Like this is a pretty casual skirt, but like a more structured skirt to me feels more dressy than most of my slacks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Let's go to, I think Alan was saying it was the first thing, actually.
I also have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First, is there a clergy outfitter that you're really impressed with the quality of their shirts? And second, what about things that aren't the collar, but you have on you when you are wearing the collar? So like those of us who wear facial hair or have earrings or things like that.
And can you, in terms of the question about like earrings, facial hair, would the question be
Like, are there like norms about men who have like a super long beard? Is that where you can't even see the collar? Would it be better to just like
You grabbing at your beard?
Or
Yours is
around
good.
here?
Clergy shirts. So I think that there are a lot of places now, and I've just been I haven't purchased clergy shirts in a while. In fact, this shirt like this was darker than the suit when I got it. So one thing to know about a lot of shirts is that they, if you wash them, they fade a little bit, and they don't if you dry clean them. This is a little bit of a tangent. I think that the church should, if you ever have to have your vestments professionally cleaned, I don't think that's a personal expense. At least it's not at St. Michael's.
And vestments are a professional expense that you can write off on your taxes.
Yeah, one way or the other, you can get it back.
Well, yeah, so the cleaning too could be that way as well, but purchasing your vestments, save those receipts, and those are a professional expense that you can write off on your taxes. My accountant tells me vestments but not blouses, because if you could wear it on the bus, it's it's your personal wardrobe, but if you only wear it inside the church building, then it's a professional expense. So, sorry.
No, that's great. I think dry cleaning shirts is that you'd have to get clarity about that from your church, whether, where that falls. I've heard that go both ways. If you want to keep your shirt nice and black and they expect it to be dry cleaned, or they, you don't want it to fade. But to your question, I don't actually know. I mean, Whipple in England used to be kind of when I was coming out, like, the high quality, the bias went towards Whipple. I don't know if that's, Almy apparently is where a lot of people get shirts, but I don't know kind of where people buy clergy shirts anymore. I tend to still get mine from Whipple, but that's only because that's just where I get
think
them.
Almy are the least expensive, and I think that Whipple still is pretty high quality stuff.
That's
For a standard clergy shirt. For women, I think you want to find a place that will let you choose the blouse size and the collar size separately. That's really unlikely to be standard off the rack for most of us, and so you want a place that's going to let you put those two pieces together. And Almy doesn't do that. Whipple might do that for women's blouses. I can't remember. They're so ugly. Whipple shirts are so ugly for women.
February 27th.
Okay, so check it out. You can try on other colors.
But don't bring collars.
So I like Clergy Image for women. You know them. You know their swing dress that everybody has. And Abiding Spirit, which was called Women's Spirit when I was first out of seminary, used to be the only game in town and they will do things to size and help you get your measurements right. And they've expanded their line to include a lot more dresses, and they're really nice. So, I don't know. I mean, I still think Whipple is considered because they are still the most expensive, but that may not be the best quality. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, it's been a while since I've bought anything. I mean, that's the other thing, is that, like, this stuff's kind of expensive, and out of seminary, if you're fortunate, you might be able to pull together some gift certificates and friends and family to kind of get you going. But, like, I don't know about you, but, like, I both want to look nice. I want my shirt, to not lose its color. But life is also expensive, and whenever I think about where I want my disposable income to go, like clergy vestments and clergy attire is not where I go immediately. And so for good or for ill, I kind of make it on what I have as long as I can, and I've been coasting for a long time.
But if you take care of it, it can last.
It can, yes. Yeah.
Whipple, I've heard, if you dry clean their shirts, if you get them dry cleaned and you take care of them, their reputation is that it's very high quality.
And the Clergy Image and the Women's Spirit stuff will stay blacker if you just don't dry it in the dryer. If you're willing to hang it to dry, they'll last a lot longer and stay blacker too, so, in my experience. And so for like budget stuff, I think my experience is a blouse is like $50 to $60 and then another $15 for the collar. And I think the men's clergy shirts are close to that. And then a dress is gonna start at like $100 up to like $150 or so for a clergy dress. So, the nice thing about some of the women's, for me, like Abiding Spirit and Clergy Image, is they're women-owned companies that do all their production in the US. And like, I was saying this to Caitlin yesterday at dinner, like, of all of my clothes, I'm confident that my clergy clothes are ethically made. I'm less confident about a lot of the other things I wear, but I know my clergy clothes have been made by like a person in the US making a living wage, and that's nice. Like I really like that piece of it, and I pay more for that than I do for my non-clergy shirts. And that is partly because it's a specialty item, but partly because I'm not that careful about how my other things are made.
I know of clergy like Eileen who get like buy regular clothes and get them tailored into clergy shirts.
Yeah.
I have a few like that. Eileen does it better than I do. So I don't like, they don't fit right to me. They don't look, again, because you can't get the collar and the shirt in the same, and maybe because I don't get them tailored the right way, I don't like, and I am picky. Like I'm super conservative about all of this, and you all may feel different about it. Like, but I don't like a button. Like if I'm gonna wear a button shirt, it's gonna be a covered placket, because that's the tradition, and that's the, again, the clearest symbol, and all of that. You know that's like a hangover, like when buttons used to be expensive, and so we would clergy would cover their buttons as a modesty thing, so that people wouldn't see if you had expensive, you know, like you weren't showing off your fancy buttons the way maybe other people were. Like at least that's one thing I've heard about that. But like obviously buttons are not expensive anymore, but like it's just like I lean towards the more traditional in my clergy dress, maybe not all my dress, but in my clergy dress for sure. So
I have a question. If you were going to another state and you were flying somewhere to like both preach and preside, what things would you bring with you, and how would you take them, like flying?
That's great.
Do you do garment back? Yeah.
That's a really good question.
So that's, I mean, again, I know it's a never-ending thing, of like things that you should buy, but I think that's raised, like there are times, you do need to transport your vestments, right? When you go to, I mean, just Austin Council, or if you're flying, you know, on a plane, or if you're, you know, gonna go to a friend's celebration of new ministry or ordination, you know, you need some sort of at some point, garment bag and things like that. So all these places sell them. If I could go back in time, I'd buy a nicer one than the one I currently have. It's probably worth your while to get something that actually folds up and travels well, as opposed to just like a glorified, you know, thing you get when you buy a suit. I don't know how much they cost, but I would get something if you can that travels easily. And in terms of what vestments I wear, whatever's appropriate for the setting in which I'm preaching.
But would you like bring your own stoles and chasuble, or would you assume that they had them?
I would. You can always ask. I would bring this. I mean, it never. So it's still so easy to bring, right? And when in doubt, I mean, you're going to be in a setting, right? So for instance, like, what's the color? You know, every bishop has their customary. You know, sometimes people want red for ordination. Sometimes, like, I mean, it's changed since I've been here in the diocese, and I've gone to events where I'm like there's like a particular feast day, but it's also Lent, but it's also a this. Like I'm like, okay, it's either gonna be white, red, or white. You know, like I've had like it could be one of 3 colors I'm supposed to invest in today, and so it's not uncommon for me to carry when I don't know like multiple stoles. But it never hurts to bring your own stole. It's not hard, especially if you're like carrying investments. You just kind of throw it around the hanger. I can't imagine any situation in which I would fly with a chasuble. I mean, if you're, I would only wear one if I were the celebrant, and that were the culture of the place. And my guess is that they would have one. But if you're going to be celebrating the Eucharist and you know that the one that you have fits really, really well, then you can always travel with the chasuble. But I don't know how well that would actually fit in the garment bag that they sell.
Is it customary for priests to own their own chasubles, or is it no? They're just even
I don't
for
own any
ordinations.
I guess I had one that they put on me when I got ordained, and I'm not sure where it is.
There's something you can.
So it's not like a BYO like.
BYOC.
No, so a chasuble matches the altar frontal
Right.
usually, and the other pieces of the architecture. And so, no, you should, and we'll talk about this in Liturgy 3, but particularly in that context, you are meant to be part of the furniture too. Like, I mean, I know that sounds really terrible, but I also think it's really true. That when you know, and so no, you don't bring your own chasuble because you're gonna wear the one that goes with what the altar's dressed in, and you're gonna be part of the altar in that moment.
I knew someone who was buying a bunch and I was surprised.
Yeah, I don't know why
It
you
was weird
did
that
that.
they were buying.
Like I said, I had one at my ordination and I literally think I've lost it in 4 moves since then. I don't know where it is, so,
Will we be paying them for our ordination?
usually you are vested in one at your ordination, but it doesn't mean you have to, you could borrow one from your curacy parish, or it doesn't have to be your own, it can be one from your.
You also don't have to be.
That's
I mean,
true.
like, you know, when you are vested as a priest, it can just be, the way that the priest wears the stole, right? The stole can be, I mean, like, it is, especially, it depends on your diocese, it depends on, like, where you go. I think the trend has been most priests in the Diocese of Texas, when vested, will be vested in a chasuble. Not
Yeah.
always.
But what I was thinking about that, Josh had a chasuble at his ordination to the priesthood, and it was lovely and beautiful and symbolic, and then I thought, he's not ever gonna wear that again in St. Michael's. We never wear them at St. Michael's.
He wears it.
He wears it now? So he's the only one of us who wears
There's
it.
a revolution, but I've given him full reign to do whatever he wants.
So there you go, but you might be in a parish where you're not gonna wear it, and
We
maybe you
even
don't
have
want
like
to.
the incense thing hanging, like, we're gonna be an Anglo-Catholic
Oh,
parish.
no.
next month.
Really?
He was so excited about
Uh,
this.
He's like slowly making us over. Yeah.
Well, there you go, I was wrong. But, you might be in a parish where chasubles are not done, and maybe you don't wanna wear one at your ordination, it's okay.
I'm just worried that I'll need to wear one and it'll be like 6 inches, in
Uh-huh.
my hands, and drag on the ground, so.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, like, it's not an ungrounded, like, that kind of goes back to, I mean, this is again part of the dance of, like, it's why you definitely want to have your own stoles. But it is I mean, like, this is like something that at some point may need to be navigated. Going to a place where it's the expectation that the celebrant wears a chasuble, that's your own liturgical preference, and the past, every priest has been a giant, and you're like, this doesn't
We do.
and you have and it's not going to work for anybody for you to wear something that doesn't fit, and so then you have to have that conversation. But under no circumstance should you be in a position where you need to buy your own chasuble because what the church has doesn't fit. That would not strike me as being appropriate, especially if that's not something you want to buy.
Yeah, so they should either alter what they have so that it fits you, or buy you one that matches and fits. And you're not being high maintenance by insisting on that, if that's what you find you need, so, yeah.
I got a question, I wanna make sure Caitlin's done.
I'm good, thanks, guys.
Is there anything you keep, like, emergency go-to, like, I gotta have this on my car? And I've heard things like reconciliation stoles, like, I have something on me all the time, I don't leave from that.
This is the one that Danielle recommended for that. I don't know if I can't remember if you all knew Danielle or not, but anyway, this is a bib Janie, and I brought it for that in case of that. And she found it helpful to keep this in her car. I do not, but this is nice because you can throw it on in the car and tuck it in around your shirt and be in clergy dress if you need to. I never really needed that. I think Danielle was more like the type who would like jump out of her car at an accident and pray with people, and I'm not that person. Like, maybe that's a terrible, but that's not who I am, that's not what I would do. But Danielle was, right? And so she liked having this on hand, literally in the glove box in that kind of a context, so. Do you keep a collar at your office even when you're going in without?
I do, but it doesn't do me any good. I have a clergy shirt there as well. I probably should. I mean, there's a few questions here for me. One is, how, like, in an emergency, how far away are you from your house? Like, if I lived an hour from my house, that'd be different. I can be at my home in 5 minutes. The other is, like, what sort of priest are you? And it's not like a loaded or trick question. Like, you really have to kind of figure out, because everyone's gonna hold up for you conflicting ideals of who you should be. A priest is someone who drops everything to go, be with someone in a crisis. She sat with me, or he sat with me for 2 days. Well, that can be a sign of great faithfulness or a sign of great irresponsibility. It really depends on the context. And I have to say, there are very few things with my life right now. There are some things, but there's very few things where the most important thing for me to do is to drop what I'm doing to go be with somebody else. It does happen. It happened 2 weeks ago when I went to a parishioner's home to do last rites. She was dying. No brainer. You go. Like, so-and-so's dying, you go. Especially when, you know that it's 24 hours or less. I happen to be wearing a collar. Had I not, I would have rushed home and I would have put on something that looked like, I would have, looked like a priest. And I would have had holy oil, I would have had my prayer book, I would have had a white stole. But I can kind of come up with all that on relatively short notice with where I am. And there are very few instances where, like, I'm gonna drop everything and go. I'm not saying that you should be that sort of priest. You might find yourself in a position where you're the so-and-so for pastoral care, and part of your job agreement is, I'm the person, I'm the guy or the gal who drops everything and goes. If I had infinite resources on staff, I'd be like, well, we have one of those people. Like, your job would be just to drop everything and go. And so if you find yourself in that position and your home is an hour away, and I would have lots of supplies on hand. So I think it just all kind of depends on who you are and what the situation is.
But most of that stuff your parish is gonna have, so, like, I have a beautiful at-home communion set that has basically only ever decorated my office, because when I've been in a parish, it's been much easier to use the one that the parish has, because the altar guild kept it refreshed and packaged up and ready to go, and I knew where they were sitting, and I could just grab one of those when I needed to go. And that was much better than putting my own in the mix with that. And the same with the healing oil and the stoles and all of those things. I would use the resources of the parish, because then it's a shared responsibility for taking care of those things, and I found that much easier to have those available that way than to keep my own somewhere separate from the shared resources. So that again might depend on your context, right? Like I've mostly served in large parishes where there was a really organized and functional altar guild, and if you're someplace where that's less likely to happen and you're responsible for caring for a lot of those things yourself because there's not a group of lay people, one, I would encourage you to invite lay people into that. That can be a really special ministry for them to share with you, but also you may need more of that on your own.
You asked a question about beards and earrings and things like that.
Just like the accessories that we have by virtue of being human.
Yeah.
Shoes, makeup.
Yeah.
Makeup. I mean, I don't have, the last thing
When
I think, what's that?
When I pierce my eyebrow.
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, I think, again, there's no rules. I mean, the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean, for me to represent the church and, to be present for the sake of mission? And to be super clear, like, when I say represent the church, I don't mean you don't wear the eye ring or the nose ring. I don't mean any of that. As if, like, church was a place without those things. I just mean, like, what does it mean for that to guide my decisions? I mean, in terms of long beards, we have plenty of priests with long beards. In most religious traditions, long beards are a sign of holiness and goodness. Like in our culture, there might be a bias to a more clean-cut kind of feel, but I don't think that I don't think that any of that is a stumbling block. To me, I don't think it's a stumbling block. But also it does depend. It does depend on your setting. I mean, I remember we years ago at St. Michael's, we had a nursery worker, and I had a conversation with some parents who just had like multiple piercings, and there was just a little bit. I mean, like, dropping off your child at the nursery for the first time. Like, it's not a thoughtful thing. It's like a gut, this is my baby thing, and there was some discomfort. And this wasn't a priest, right? But the conversation that we leaned into was like, okay, let's just kind of unpack all of this. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? Like, what are the different options? And kind of lean into that conversation, kind of loosened it up and helped us try to figure out what was appropriate for that setting.
What about tattoos? Sensing either new visible tattoos. That experience for.
But I know plenty of priests who do, and even in places like hands and wrists and such that aren't hidden, and it doesn't seem to be an issue anymore.
In Texas.
In
Yeah,
Texas,
yeah,
at
I
least,
mean-
yeah, there might be contexts where that's not true.
I think in our context, I've never, I think, yeah, I've never, I mean, Josh has lots of tattoos, and I think that's kind of cool.
Is that great peace label?
Yeah, I think tattoos are in now.
John and I consulted before.
Yeah.
Did you?
We had this exact conversation about it beforehand.
So,
One last question. I'm curious about like clergy spouse dress.
that's
And
a
like
tricky one.
yeah.
I mean, and the question is like, are there expectations or?
Yeah, or like kind of expectations and also like different events of like Sunday morning versus like I don't know like a social church get together and
Yeah, I can only speak for myself.
I'm not helpful in this context at all.
So here's the thing, this is its own like workshop,
Yeah.
right? But what I would say about that is, I think about Emily and my wife.
Who is the most beautiful woman in cartoon land and always looks appropriate and elegant and lovely. She's fantastic.
Thank
So.
you. Like I would, like if I were ever at a place to where I was like pressuring her and like leaning on her, like to say, like you gotta, like I need you to be the pastor. Like I mean, like really kind of like violently or aggressively signaling to her that I needed her to be an extension. Like I mean, that would be inappropriate, harmful to our marriage, and wrong, right? On the other hand, if she was not aware that she was viewed in a particular way, that this is a team sport, it really is a team sport, and that there wasn't something happening she needed to be mindful of that impacted both her and me and us, like that would be tricky. And so this is like a little dance to where like you just have to kind of figure it out, you know, as a couple, and to be in each other's corner and to kind of figure out kind of how that works.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one though.
Yeah. That's helpful.
You asked about all the other trappings of, I mean, again, I think that's really contextual. When I was on the cathedral staff in the Deep South, it absolutely mattered that I show up with a full face of makeup every single Sunday, right? And if I didn't, I would have been the only woman in the room who didn't. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't just about like what are people judging me for. This was also about being relevant to this context, right? And a woman with no makeup on was not relevant in that context. I mean, I don't think I was like, I think I'm exaggerating, but I don't think I am. Everyone showed up in it, right? And I wore a lot more high heels in that context too than I do now. Because again, like I look around the room and if I don't wear high heels, I'll be the only woman under 50 who is in flats. Like it's not done for women our age in this context, right? And now, like I put on makeup for Josh's ordination. That's about it. Like I don't really have to, I don't feel the pressure to do that, and it's not such an issue, and I can wear these shoes pretty much everywhere I need to go now. And so it really, again, that's an extension of your context of what's gonna make you, because you're showing up relevant and also as a leader, right? And so there is that step about what John said about one step above, or one step more formal or more than your parish, or than your parishioners. Like, there's no way I could have achieved that at the Cathedral of Shreveport, right? Like I didn't have the budget, nor do I have the skills to be that put together. But if I'm gonna show up in that context as a leader and completely ignore the norm that everybody is wearing a full face of makeup, that people, you know, that their hair is really carefully done, like all of those things, that's a choice too, and it would have communicated something really clearly to them about what I thought about the values that went into the way they dressed every morning, right? So, and not something I meant. So, it mattered to put that on. I will say, and I don't do it 100% of the time, but wearing lipstick, even if that's the only makeup you wear, can help people hear you better, because people don't realize how much they're reading lips. And if you put on lipstick, that contrast between your lips and your face can make it easier for some of your older parishioners to hear you.
That's interesting.
So as a practical tip, if you are a person for whom wearing lipstick would be a reasonable embodied choice, it might help people hear you better. That's something I've learned from Sister Clergy, cross traditions, so, if you're comfortable with it. It's not a reason to wear lipstick if it's really not your thing, but if it is, maybe in your spectrum of possibilities.
I want to respect everyone's time, and also I agree, so I'm getting to dash over to the chapel. But I wanted to thank you all for coming, and I want to invite you to stay on the lookout for a feedback survey that's going to be coming your way. We really appreciate any kind of feedback we can get, constructive or celebratory. Helps us gauge how we're doing with our workshop offerings. Thanks to both of you. It was great to meet you, John, and obviously to see you. Hope, and if they're hanging around to continue the conversation, that's good. I'm sorry I got to duck out. Thank you.
Thank you so much.